So you guys, some of you guys, you might have a good day. Early in the morning, I don't remember what I want to cover. Yeah.
Good morning, everybody. Today is the pretty much the last day of your workshop because this will be the last class you'll be having. But from what I understand from Maman, you're supposed to pass the homework by noon, but I think less than half has only submitted to her. So for the rest, remember to submit by noon, yeah.
Still got time. Yeah. See, yeah, yeah. We want to fully. Should be so that he's on my side.
So once again, welcome everybody. Today we will be having Dr. Saleh covering the topic of integrating ESG principles into international engineering. Let's welcome Dr. Saleh.
Slide to begin. More keyboard. Can I request this slide in front of me? Just a front line. Expected. So we all settled in. Can we start, or we are waiting for somebody else? We can start. Hey, good morning, everyone. How are we doing today? Sorry, I was just hearing from her just now. You guys got some homework to do as well. I'm a bit surprised that I'm not surprised that it wasn't submitted on time. It's understandable. We are done with doing homeworks, right? So don't worry, I won't give you any homework. I heard it's the last day of law. It's off. Okay. Sorry, Dr. Adrian. So yeah, as I was saying, so I heard it's the last day of your workshop. So no homework from my side. So we are safe with that regards. Okay, so without any further ado, please allow me to introduce myself. I'm Dr. Saleh Sharman. You can call me Saleh or Sharman or Dr. Saleh, whichever you prefer. A bit of the background of where I come from, what I have been doing all this while, and why am I here in the first place, giving a talk on integrating ESG into engineering, the industry, the sector, or principles of ESG into engineering. So what I understand is most of you are engineers here. If not, that is also okay. I myself come from an engineering background. I have done my bachelor's of engineering in mechanical engineering from University of Nottingham. Also have a PhD from University of Nottingham in energy security policy modeling, basically developing an energy security index that can tell you through futuristic approach of modeling on how feasible your energy policies are for a particular nation. In my case, it is Malaysia. And as you can see, the passion that I have from ESG actually doesn't come because it is a buzzword today or it is the trending industry today for people to learn about ESG or become consultants or practitioners. For me, ESG is something, or environmental sustainability rather, is something that I've been implementing for the last 10 years because of my academic background. So my academic research has always been focused towards building environmental sustainability and particularly looking into energy policies of a nation and how to make the country's energy policies and their targets work, or basically figuring out whether it's going to work in the first place or not. So that is what my PhD was all about. And with regards to that, you can see I have published around 12 journal articles in high impact journals related to energy and sustainability. At the same time, I've been also working quite closely with a lot of industry partners and industry players, and I have serviced more than 19 sustainability projects across the globe. So when I say sustainability projects, it is with regards to carbon management, carbon sequestration, nature-based solutions for carbon sequestration, sustainability strategies, ESG disclosures, ESG reporting, and so on and so forth. And also, one thing that I very firmly believe in is if we have gained certain knowledge or upskilled ourselves through this industry and academic experience, we should not just limit it to ourselves or my team members. We should always be able to share as much as we can. And as a result of that, I have been accredited by HRD Corp to be a HRD Corp trainer so that I can train people like you and enthusiasts like you or passionate people in sustainability and ESG. And as a result, you can see that the last point here, it states I've covered more than 500 hours of training hours in the last year, which is a part of my, or a way that I'm giving back to the community of the practitioners and people who are interested and passionate about sustainability. So that's briefly about myself. I'm happy to communicate with you further if you need to know more about me in the future, or if any way I can help you further. Also, my co-trainers who are not here today because they are facilitating some other session elsewhere is Miss Jashreen and Miss Kalpana. Always put their profile out there because we work as a team and we help each other always develop the content. So Miss Jashreen and Miss Kalpana unfortunately aren't here with us today. Some of the work that we have done recently, I'm not going to name the clients, but it's there as a part of the corporate profile. We work in oil and gas, we work in fintech, infrastructure companies, conglomerates, manufacturers, paper and pulp companies, fintech, HR companies. Modon in Saudi Arabia, if anybody from that part of the world, you would know they are the Industrial City Development Authority, and they are the largest in Saudi Arabia for maintaining the industrial estates and industrial parks. So we have been recently working with them as well, with our strategic partners from Melbourne, on developing circular economy principles for circular economy roadmaps and principles for the accelerated factories who are up there to become more circular moving forward. So that is one of the initiatives with Model that we are working on. And a lot of companies in Malaysia, some of the big names as well, Sunday Construction, CDC, Spritzer Berhad, KPIs per head, and so on and so forth. We've been working with them for training and upskilling as well, internal session or public session as such. Okay, so without any further ado, what I'll do first is I'll run you through the agenda for today's session. I understand I have around 2.5 hours with the breaks, basically like 3 hours with the breaks. So I will try to pace myself accordingly for the sessions here today. We are starting off with understanding what is ESG or sustainability in the first place, and then what is sustainability for engineers or in the engineering industry. Number two, we'll try to categorize some of the engineering industries and try to understand how they do differ from each other and ESG practices differ within the different industries. Then we deep dive into ESG in construction, transportation, and in the energy sector. And lastly, we will talk about ESG risk management. ESG risk management has become a very pertinent topic. The Malaysian companies here, they would know, because if you are following the new updates by the Ministry of Finance, you're aware that Malaysia is now moving towards standardization of sustainability standards. It's no longer the Securities Commission and the Bursa Malaysia style of reporting certain indicators for your ESG disclosure. We are moving towards the direction of the IFRS S1 and the S2 standards. S1 standards is with regards to sustainability related financial matters, and S2 standards are related to climate related financial matters with regards to ESG and sustainability. So when you disclose your ESG and sustainability practices, the risk assessment, the risk management becomes a key factor. And as a part of that, what I've tried to do today is develop a sample or a template of a risk register that you may follow with regards to risks in the industry that we are talking about today. So I hope I can cover these 4 topics as much as I can and as in depth as I can in this next 3 hours. But to be very honest with you, it would essentially take me much longer to deep dive into each of these particular modules. But we'll try our best to cover as much as we can today. Any questions so far? Anything that needs to be clarified with regards to the agenda of the day? Anybody? If not, then I'll just proceed. Okay, so overview of sustainability. In this case, how I normally define sustainability, the truth or fact is there is no set definition that can define what sustainability is. For every individual, for every organization, for every country, for a specific region, this definition can vary on a case-to-case basis, right? So sustainability for me as an individual would be as simple as how am I behaving today, or what am I leaving back today for my future generation as an individual, because I have to think about my next generation. For businesses, you are rather thinking your practices today, how it would affect the business, the next generation of your business. Or rather, how do you build resilience in your business in order to prevent future shocks? That is sustainability for me as an individual or as an organizational standpoint. If I'm talking about my own organization, EcoThinkers, I would be thinking of how am I upskilling my team members today, or what kind of SOPs I'm developing today that in my absence, my team can run business as usual. That would be sustainability for EcoThinkers, right? Similarly, sustainability for engineers, sustainability for HR practitioners, sustainability for finance individuals, for administrative team members, sustainability for operations team members, it would vary, not significantly, but it would vary on a case-to-case basis how you perceive of this term, right? So having said that, can I probably put the mic around the room to ask, what do you understand about this term sustainability? And it's absolutely okay for you to say that I don't really care about this term, because what I care about is today, my business that needs to run to the best of its potential today, I'm not very bothered about sustainability. Anybody who can define sustainability according to your own terms or your means in the room, anything, you can define it as anything. You can throw some terms at me as well, no problem. Go green, yes. So according to, so what's your name? Benedict. According to Mr. Benedict, he's saying it's an agenda of go green. Yes, no, not a problem. But it's again very generic. So it's okay, not an issue. Anybody else? Any other terms? I'm sure you've heard this term. It's floating around recently. Over the last 2-3 years, it has been floating around even more. What is this all about? Yes. Right. Right. So basically, you're thinking that it is a long-term vision for which you are going to protect your resources now in order for the younger generation to have easy access to them or make it more readily accessible to them in the future. That is a very good way of defining sustainability. Thank you very much. Anybody else in the room? Any other term or any other definition that you want to provide to me so that as a team we can figure out how we can define this? Okay. So, you're thinking in the right direction. Okay. Right. Right. Okay. This is a great way of defining it, honestly, because he's saying it is the long-term commitment where you are not only thinking of the home, you are thinking of the ecosystem where you operate, right? Which means, so are you in manufacturing or any other industry? Which industry are you in? From hydropower, right? He himself is from an industry where you are looking into alternative solutions, pouring other than fossil fuels. So what he said and what Sir John name is Sam, right? Okay. So what the three of them said, let me try to combine it. Long-term commitment, not only looking into one specific dimension, you are talking about an entire ecosystem. When I talk about an entire ecosystem, if you are a manufacturer or if you are any organization, you have some interrelationship between the natural environment, the society, the community, and of course, internally within your internal stakeholders. So it is a commitment to ensure as a business that you are aware of your impact in the longer term on all these different stakeholder groups that I've mentioned, right? As a result, if you look into this diagram as well, and this definition, it states very clearly that number one, first thing, it doesn't have a fixed definition. Number two, sustainability, you always have to think from a multi-dimensional standpoint, which means if you look into this diagram that looks like a Venn diagram, you're looking into 3 dimensions here that I mentioned: environment, society, and economy, right? And it is not just limited to that. It can be environment, society, economy, governance. It can be in any of this order. It does not really matter. What matters is your understanding that sustainability is not just about environmentalism, but as Mr. Benedict shared, it's go green was the initial agenda that actually started. But sustainability and ESG is beyond that because you are bringing in the factor of the external environment, community, the society, and your internal employees and staff, right? So always make sure that you are very clear that sustainability is not just environmentalism. It also finds concerns for social equity and economic development. The other term that is probably missing here is at the same time upholding good governance practices. Right? So this is sustainability. Simpler terms, how you behave today would have an implication on what you leave behind for your next generation. As a result, we have started these practices of different sustainability initiatives to improve our overall accessibility and affordability to resources, our access to natural resources, our affordability of natural resources, our upskilling and training of employees, community contribution to the community who are impacted by your operations, which is typically called CSR for you. I'm sure you've been part of CSR activities before. So all of this in a combination is sustainable, right? Is it clear? If not, I can repeat myself, no problem. Happy to do that. But fundamentally, at the very beginning, we need to get this thing correct because everything else that follows from here would require you to understand these key concepts very well, right? So if this is very clear, I will proceed. Now, the other term or phrase or this terminology that you hear a lot these days is called ESG. And when I ask people what is ESG, they would simply tell me it is environment, social, and governance. Yes, that is the full form of ES and G. But technically, can anybody tell me what is ESG? Anyone? Other than environment, social, and governance, that is very obvious. Can anybody tell me what is your understanding of ESG? Any hands? Anything you can be free to answer anything. There's no right or wrong to this. Trust me. Have anybody worked in the field of sustainability or ESG before? Or for your current organization, you're working like corporate comms, corporate affairs, risk and compliance team? No one? You have? Yes. So what is ESG? This term is
basically, from my perspective, ESG is aspects, but also making sure that the company objectives and the project area where you are operating meets it's both the parties effectively and so not by preserving the ecosystems and also by promoting jobs locally and also ethical practices. Yes, I would actually want to give an example where resilience initiative that's been done by where we make sure that we have actually trained the locals, providing the job opportunities, and creating and creating an environment where they are trained and they can also. I mean, training them in such a way that they can go and like you. That's what we offer. Yes. So we actually what would like to run at level as rather than just so we have the long term financial benefits, but by markets. Right. So also I would like to add, the Jetsi part, the gender equality, social inclusion. Right. That I understand. So, there's very part actually doing projects are concerned, but ESG principles are not only for the project to meet the economic goals. It must be contributing in the environment and socialize positively and effectively for the long
The two gentlemen has put together some thoughts on what ESG is about and very well put together. So they are already thinking in the direction of categorizing certain initiatives under the ESG pillars. So essentially, ESG is an analysis framework. For any organization, when it really asks you what ESG is for you, it is an analysis framework for any organization where you categorize your sustainability practices under the respective pillars. Again, if you're talking about upskilling your team members and employees and upskilling the community around you, you are parking that initiative under your social pillar. Under the environment pillar, you're looking into things like your wastewater management, your waste management, you're looking into your carbon footprint management, you're looking into things like biodiversity assessment, you're looking into things like land reclamation, you're looking into things like soil health, and a few other factors that can be parked under the E pillar, right? Parallelly, for governance, what you are looking into are facts like whether the organization has good corporate governance practices, policies, ABC policies, anti-corruption and bribery policies, anti-money laundering policies. We are looking into supplier code of conduct. We're looking into business ethics. We're looking into certain best practices for ethical business conducts as well. So those would fall under your governance. From an economic standpoint or a business standpoint, you're looking into product quality and safety. You're looking into customer retention rates. You're looking into client satisfaction rates, etc. So these now, under the ESG or ESG pillars of a framework, you are slowly starting to get some structure to this loosely held sustainability initiatives that are already in place in a business. Any good business or an organization or even an engineering project per se would already have all these things covered. So it is not something that you're doing from scratch in order to be ESG compliant or sustainability compliant. There's no such. I'll make it very clear with you. Any organization that we walk into, it's a Berhad or it's a public listed company, surely anti-bribery and anti-corruption policies are in place. Surely anti-money laundering policies are in place. If you are in engineering firm, you would know how important it is to have supplier code of conduct. You would know how important it is to have supplier screening methods, procurement policies that ensure there are proper due diligence done before suppliers are engaged, supplier risk assessment. These terms or these phrases or these assessments are not something that is new to engineering companies, or in fact, any good organization that follows ethical business practices. So all these years before this ESG and sustainability became a buzzword, it used to be called business continuity planning, right? You've heard of this term called business continuity planning. Previously, businesses used to develop this thing called business continuity plan, which would make sure that you are aware of the organization's current standpoint, which is currently where you stand against certain KPIs and certain indicators and matrices, versus setting targets of where you want to reach in the future, in the short term and the long term, right? ESG framework essentially does the same thing. ESG framework gives it a bit more structure, as I said. Now you are slowly starting to bring in and pull all these different initiatives, SOPs, best practices, and park them under your ESG pillars or ESG pillars, right? And you are measuring them against certain matrices. Number one, and the most important factor here is prioritizing them. Prioritization of sustainability matters. We call this either materiality assessment, or we call this sustainability maturity prioritization exercise, whichever way you want to call it, the first step moving forward for any organization when you are thinking of developing an ESG framework is to prioritize how these individual sustainability matters rank in order of significance to your business, your financial health of the organization, and significance to the reputational risk of your business. I'm sorry I'm throwing a lot of terms at you, but this is how I need you to think. First thing is the prioritization of all the sustainability matters, as I said, carbon footprint assessment, wastewater management, water management, etc. Under the E pillar, under the social pillar, human rights policies, labor rights policies, learning and development, training and development, community engagement, CSR, all these activities or initiatives under the governance pillar, all these initiatives, you need to prioritize. When you prioritize, industry to industry, company to company, the ranking normally varies. They depend on your organizational goals and objectives. They vary based on where you want to be in the near or in the longer future from an organizational standpoint. They vary based on your value chain. Every organization has a unique value chain attached to it. What is a value chain? A value chain normally maps the relationships, resources, and the interlinkages between the stakeholder engagement of an organization, all the way from your upstream activities to your downstream activities. So every organization has a unique value chain. And across this entire value chain, whatever sustainability matters, topics are pertinent, you need to prioritize them. You need to put them in the framework, which is your ESG analysis framework. When next time anybody asks you what ESG is all about, ESG is an analysis framework that allows us to set targets, monitor and manage our sustainability initiatives, and assess the risks associated with each of those initiatives and targets, right? So essentially, this is what ESG framework enables you to do. ESG framework for me is an enabler for investor-focused discussion. I have seen cases in my client where my clients have raised sustainability-related bonds, and in Malaysia we call it sustainability-related sukuk. Malaysian here? Yeah, so SLS, sustainability-linked sukuk, and sustainability-related bonds and funds that they have received, enormous amounts of funds solely from the standpoint of their ESG practices. And I can name the companies, but of course I won't. They are in manufacturing, waste management, and infrastructure mostly. Very similar to your field, if you are from this field. So ESG or ESG framework, sustainability strategies, disclosure, they are more investor focused. They are not for corporate greenwashing or whitewashing your practices, etc. I am very against those organizations or practices where you just disclose something in your annual report for the sake of disclosing. And I can name you hundreds and thousands of companies who are still doing that. You open an annual report and there is just a chunk called sustainability statement or corporate social responsibility, and just write about your beach cleaning programs or your camps you've attended, etc. It is not what ESG and sustainability is all about. An ESG framework will enable an investor to understand whether I should or shouldn't invest in an organization, because a good ESG framework tells you how resilient your business is against certain shocks. One example of when I was working with a semicon company in Penang, the time when we had the shortage of chips. Does anybody remember the time there was a global shortage of chips for the semicon industry? And I had asked my client, like, so what are your risk mitigation measures or steps that you have in place? So when we were in the stakeholder engagement session, face to face, they would answer all my questions very diligently. They knew what are the repercussions, they knew how to mitigate it, they knew what are their what are the alternative suppliers? They have a diverse portfolio of suppliers, etc. But when I asked for it, where did you document all this? There is no trace of documentation of everything that they're talking about. But deep down, I know, you know that we are safe. But that's only limited if I have a direct conversation with you, which I don't have the flexibility or leeway to have on a regular basis. So how would you expect to attract investors or shareholders or be answerable to your shareholders in a case of occurrence of any kind of risk as such? If you have never classified that as a risk in the first place, or you have never really thought about what are the mitigation measures in place, right? So when you are developing an ESG framework or a report for your organization, it is essential that you take all this factor into consideration and just move away from the traditional way of just writing about CSR practices. Right? So that brings me. Okay, so the next slide, essentially, I've already covered everything, but I'll summarize it for you here if you want to take a quick look at the summary. The ESG framework considers both short and long-term performances and value creation for an organization, addressing key environmental, social governance, and economic or business-related material matters. It links ESG metrics and their performance directly to financial decision making. ESG also serves as a strategic framework to meet stakeholder expectations and regulatory requirements. So again, emphasizing on meeting stakeholder expectations and regulatory requirements. In Malaysia, for us, the regulators we are answerable to would be Department of Environment, we are answerable to DOSH, we are answerable to Bursa Malaysia, we are answerable to Ministry of Finance, we are answerable to Bank Negara Malaysia, which is the national bank, right? So for you being answerable to them, the only form of communication other than face-to-face meetings and engagement or town halls, etc., would be through your sustainability disclosures, where essentially you should have a very robust ESG framework in place, ESG risk assessment in place, very clearly identified material topics and their prioritization in place, so that the regulators are aware of your best practices, aware of your example, how much are you emitting, how much effluent are you generating, how much water are you consuming, where are you drawing your water from, what are your sources, etc. So similarly, okay, so that kind of summarizes what an ESG framework is all about. What sustainability was and what ESG is. Sustainability is loosely held initiatives. It can be anything. It can be me taking a MRT or an LRT or a public bus to travel from point A to point B to reduce my carbon footprint as an individual instead of taking my private car. Or it can be an initiative where I try not to use single-use plastic as much as I can. Those are loosely held initiatives. Bringing these initiatives together and giving them a structure with risk management angle in place, with KPIs and target setting in place, year-on-year monitoring in place, with proper governance in place, enables that and transforms those initiatives into a ESG framework. So this is essentially how you distinguish between these two terms. And the common misconception, again, CSR, corporate social responsibility. Sometimes companies will disclose CSR reports. I'm not against it, no problem. But please understand that CSR is just one element of the social pillar. In the social pillar, as the gentleman there, he was discussing, they are trying to empower the community around, not just by giving one-off financial aid. They are trying to build people there with important skills and necessary skills so that they can generate income for them month on month, year on year. This kind of a practice is one of the best practices under CSR, which is corporate social responsibility. And then the most common CSR activities we come across are blood donation campaigns, tree planting campaigns, weed clearing campaigns, or going out with your colleagues and volunteer for certain cause those are your CSR activities. CSR activities, do not confuse them with the ESG framework. CSR is just a small part of the social pillar in your S pillar of the ESG framework, right? So that is one common misconception that I try to clear each time I run this fundamental session on sustainability. So far, is it clear for us on what these few terms essentially mean? If not, I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have for me. Anybody? Yeah. Okay. Now, moving into our session's focus today, international engineering industries. So we know that when we talk about engineering, engineering is a kind of a discipline or a practice that is kind of across diverse industries and sectors. You need engineers in basically most of the organizations that are currently present in this world today. I'm sure you won't find an organization that doesn't have an engineer who's taking care of certain engineering related activities, even engineers today who are taking care of certain finance related activities, certain HR related activities, and so on. Having said that, some of the industries that you may look at from an ESG standpoint that would have very deep or impactful footprint from an ESG framework standpoint would be the energy and power systems, transportation and mobility, construction and infrastructure, manufacturing and industrial engineering, oil and gas or petrochemical engineering, waste and wastewater engineering. These are some of the industries that would require very stringent or strict ESG framework or analysis framework. Right? Now, anybody here from the construction? I think I saw some of you are from the construction industry. Anybody else? Okay, construction industry. So for the construction industry, I understand that you as an organization mostly focus on project to project basis. When we say case to case basis, in your case, it's mostly project to project basis. In your industry, can you highlight from a sustainability standpoint few of these topics or material matters that are most prominent that you cannot make do without when you are doing project planning, when you are in the implementation phase? Any sustainability matters that come to your mind immediately for the engagement? Anything else in terms of assessments, some of the indicators and matrices? Okay. 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 Right. Mhm. One of resource. These are great points that you pointed. How the fact is, how well are they implemented in your projects or in your so if I am to understand in construction projects, so you are looking into more heavily focused towards your environmental and social practices, with more heavily focused towards that. Governance, having said that, at the same time, you are not neglecting them. Again, your key focus is on environment and social ESG. From a governance standpoint, I am assuming that the project to project basis, your anti-bribery and corruption policies, as I mentioned, business ethics and all of that. So you would essentially, the responsibility for that organization, his organization, would be to share all of those information with all your suppliers, all your vendors, with all your customers and clients internally as well. So as an organization, if they're doing that, that is the very first step that they are taking to make sure that the project is sustainable in nature, right? And at the same time, you are also looking into a few other factors like, as I said again, minimizing the environmental impact while maximizing the social and if it involves the use of eco-friendly materials where it's possible. I understand that the use of eco-friendly materials may not be the most cost-effective way that the construction industry thinks today, because you also have to keep in mind the cost of the project, because that you have budgeted for that. And then implementing energy efficient systems, reducing waste generation, creating healthy indoor environments. So the primary aim of sustainable construction is to minimize the depletion of natural resources, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and promote well-being of both occupants and surrounding communities. So very well highlighted. How do you take care of the surrounding community when certain lands are reclaimed? How is the how are they relocated and how are they compensated for in order for this to happen properly and in order for their livelihood and living not be affected? Is sustainability for the construction industry. So as a result, sustainable construction plays a vital role in modern construction projects and the designs of contemporary buildings, right? Now, even before I can go to the ESG pillars, what I may want to show you first is from a Malaysian standpoint. Let's look into how this sector really looks like. The Malaysia's construction sector contributed to roughly 53.44 billion ringgit to the GDP in 2022. But the concerns are growing over its carbon footprint amidst the worsening climate crisis that we have at this point in time. So Professor Dominic Fu is actually my professor last time from University of Nottingham. So I basically had a chat with him since I got invited for this session, and I know that he works very closely in this industry. He had actually emphasized that carbon dioxide concentration in the atmosphere, right? The amount of CO2 in parts per million in the atmosphere. He has highlighted it to me that it is growing at a level which is abnormal, which is not very normal. And the construction industry has a very major role to play in this, where currently you are around 417 parts per million or 420 parts per million in 2020, which is projected to go up to 450 parts per million carbon dioxide in the next 10 to 15 years, which is very alarming for us. And from a pre-industrial era, for pre-industrial time, we have grown by around 4 to 5 folds to the number that you see today. Given that Malaysia's growing population and ongoing development, halting construction is not feasible. Actually, not for Malaysia, for any part of the world, right? If I tell you that to any construction company or to any developer, property development company, you have to halt this project because I'm thinking of environmental sustainability, it's never going to happen. Let's just be realistic about it. What we can rather do is the industry needs to adopt sustainable practices instead, which would make your projects more impactful from an environmental standpoint and a social standpoint. So again, having said that, sustainability or ESG doesn't make you work on things that are not business as usual. We are trying to find solutions around your current practices to make your environmental impact lower, improve your social impact on the community and the people around, and also the people within the organization. So this is just a bit of a landscape of the Malaysian construction industry. And as you see, this is one of the news articles that says Malaysia's construction sector has been urged to embrace sustainability amid climate change. Some of the bigger names in Malaysia would be from the likes of Sunway Construction, IOI Group, Gamuda Land, etc., Genting, Berhad. So I have had the good fortune to work with a few of them as external consultant for them. So the reason also I chose this industry is because I understand some of the current practices, current needs, and pain points as well. To be very honest with you, the very first thing as a external party or a consultant that you need to understand is not go in and tell them solutions first. You have to understand what are the pain points first. If you don't understand what are the pain points, solutions will never really be realistic, to be honest. Right? So even in an organization, when you're doing your ESG framework planning or analysis that is to be done, my very first request is to make sure you understand what are your current challenges that you're trying to overcome while making sure your project runs business as usual. Because if you go and tell this to your board of directors, that I can't do this because of my carbon footprint assessment, they'll say, you know what it's, right? So I'm not, I can't say the term. So they'll say, no, find a way to make this work. So the responsibility comes on the shoulder of C-suite people. It comes on the shoulder of the managers, the HODs, the working group, on how you can better plan this in order to make this a successful project and also having successful implementation of sustainability practices around it. So again, as a practitioner, I always promote run your business as usual. However, find a solution for improving your margins, improving your efficiency, find a solution to make sure you're thinking of a longer term impact. When I talk about impact, there can be impact in two ways. So sustainability teaches you an outward in impact and an inward inside out impact as well. The inside out impact is what your organization, how your organization is impacting the external world, which is the environment, the society, and the community. That most of the cases people scrutinize on. To make it a bit more comfortable for businesses and organizations, sustainability has also come up with this concept of outside in, which means how does the environment and the society have an impact on your financial decision making as an organization? For example, the case of relocation in a construction project. If you have to relocate, you have to budget for that as well. If you're cutting 5 trees, as I said, for planting 50 trees, you need to buy the 50 trees, and on top of it, you need to find a land to plant those 50 trees. Right? That takes a toll on your financial health. So it's not just you affecting people, it's also people affecting your financial decision making. So these two terms, when we do that materiality prioritization that I spoke about earlier, first one is called an impact maturity assessment. The second one is called a financial maturity assessment on how your financial health is affected by the kind of decisions that are made by regulators, decisions made by authorities and bodies, and decisions made by the government, the ambition of going low carbon future or low carbon transition plans that we have currently, how they affect your business is also what sustainability teaches you to take into consideration to make the playing ground fair as well. It is not always that we want to scrutinize you that you are emitting 2,000 tons of CO2 from scope 1 emission every year. We also want to know that if I have to go and look for alternative sources of fuel, how would that impact my financial health? Because I have not budgeted for it. I have to now think of new budget to come up with in order to find better fuel mix for my activities, etc. Right? So that is sustainability, and the reason why I'm sharing this with you is because I want you to think in that direction or think in that manner. Okay, so typically some of the environmental initiatives and some of the examples under the E, S, and G pillars allow me to share with you. Okay, so in this industry, green building certification. Have anybody heard of this thing called green building indexing GBIs or green building certifications? Anyone? Nobody has heard of the term green building certification? Can you tell me, like, probably share with me what kind of benefit it may bring? It's okay, just share anything that you know about this GBI concept, the green building certification concept. Okay. Anything else? Also, living. Zero carbon. Is zero carbon something attainable? Attainable? Neutrality is probably attainable, but zero carbon is a concept that even I, as a practitioner, I see it is a bit far-fetched. Zero carbon is far-fetched because of the fact that we are sitting here, we are consuming electricity to do this. It leads to emission, categorized under scope 2. The fact that I drove my car and came here, burn fossil fuel, and irrespective, I have to push through the traffic and come here, I will do it even today or tomorrow. So I have burned fossil fuels, I'm directly emitting. So emissions becoming zero would be not attainable, in my opinion. It is very, very far-fetched. So this, as an individual, if I feel it's impossible, imagine as an organization, how would you achieve? It would be very difficult. Carbon neutrality is something we may talk about or think of. Maybe you said carbon neutrality. What is carbon neutrality?
Sure, there. Green energy.
Yes. That is that. So how much greenhouse gas you are emitting versus how much you're offsetting, you come to a point of steady balance, right? You can think of it from a carbon, but we have this concept called carbon bathtub analogy. When everybody here has seen a bathtub before, right? The concept of bathtub, you switch on the tap, which is the faucet, you switch it on, you have water flowing in. You envision that the water flow to be carbon dioxide or greenhouse gases flowing into the bathtub. And if you have a drainage system and you allow the drainage to drain the water at the same way that the water is flowing in from the faucet, you reach a state of carbon neutrality, right? Because how much you're emitting, the rate at which you're emitting, it is the same rate at which you are absorbing or capturing them in a natural sink or artificial sink, right? So we use this bathtub analogy for you to visualize carbon neutrality better. So scenario one, which is the best case scenario, is your faucet is completely switched off. There's no emission, and you have drained out everything else, excess carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases from the atmosphere. Scenario one, best case scenario. Scenario two is your faucet, the tap is running faster than how you are draining it. So in that case, there is an imbalance that is created, right? The bathtub would overflow. Scenario three is where the case where he has mentioned of carbon neutrality, we have a same rate of emission and same rate of capturing, offsetting them. So in these three scenarios, can anybody say which scenario we currently stand in? Scenario two, right? Scenario two, where in 2009, we were emitting from a global standpoint, roughly 9 billion metric tons of CO2 per year. We were offsetting or we were capturing roughly around 5 billion metric tons of CO2 per year. When I say capturing or offsetting, it is through the natural sinks. What are your natural sinks in the environment? Your ocean, your soil, and your natural vegetation. These three are your natural sinks that can capture the carbon that you're emitting or the greenhouse gas. Now the balance 4 billion metric tons, where does it go? It has no place to go. It remains in the atmosphere, which is and as a result, you face the consequences of it, which is change, right? So the greenhouse effect being enhanced because of human activities where we are emitting more than what we are capturing or what our natural sinks can capture, leading to an imbalance of the amount of greenhouse gases in the environment, thus leading to the environment or the atmosphere heating up faster and at a rate that is not very normal, because the concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is directly proportional to the heat that is being trapped in the atmosphere. The solar energy is constantly coming in. We are tapping in more than desirable amount of heat that is required. So that concept is basically the greenhouse effect. The reason why I deviated to that is because the topic of carbon neutrality came along. So green building certification, yes, I think, ma'am, you have answered some of the points quite rightly. So we are looking into obtaining certifications such as LEED certification. If people here are from India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, I think LEED certification is something we rely on very heavily for our factories and manufacturing plants and our manufacturing units. In Malaysia, we look into GBIs, green building indexing, green building certifications. Beyond that, there are other certifications that enhances your case or it consolidates your case of ESG and sustainability are your ISO certifications with regards to ISO 14001, 9001, and a few other ISO certifications that are specific to your industry and your organizational needs. Sometimes they are specific to your customer needs as well, right? If you have customers sitting in Europe, which is the case for the ready-made garments industry in South Asia, or even in Vietnam per se, you are meeting the requirements of your global customer who's somewhere sitting in Europe, who's somewhere sitting in the US or in the UK, where they require you to adhere to certain best practices. And in return, you abide by getting these certifications, or you abide by ensuring that you are good enough to acquire these certifications per se in a year-on-year manner. So environmental initiatives, yes, these certifications are important. Resource efficient construction methods, example, adopting prefabrication technique that reduces waste by a certain percentage and shortens your construction time. Right? Prefabrication of the construction industry is becoming a very good practice these days. I'm not sure how well it is implemented across the globe from different parts of the world. It may vary, but prefabrication is saving up a lot of time. And we all know this small phrase called time is money, which is applicable for the industry as well. Sustainable materials, opting to use recycled steel in structure, which has a lower carbon footprint compared to new steel, can be one option. But again, feasibility tests need to be done on how robust these solutions can be. On-site waste management, this can be done surely. When I say on-site waste management, segregation of waste on-site. Macro segregation followed by micro segregation, followed by engaging the right waste handlers or waste management companies to come and handle your solid waste, to come and handle your scheduled waste, to come and handle your sludge, etc. So these are a few easy initiatives to implement, and some initiatives that you should implement, you can't make do without. So these are some of the environmental initiatives that you may opt for in this industry, and the examples are made very clear. Social initiatives in construction or property development industry across the globe. I think on a yearly basis, I find cases, I read news articles, breach labor rights and human rights policies. Right? Anybody here has heard of anything as such? Cases of child labor, cases of forced labor in property development, construction, or maybe in formulations in oil palm estates, etc. We have, right? We have surely heard of cases as such. Anybody who has not heard of any case of child labor, forced labor, this? No? So it is very prominent. The breach of labor practices or fair labor practices is very prominent now in our industry. And to prevent that from happening, what you can probably do is introduce a comprehensive health and safety training program that drastically reduces on-site accidents. Beyond that, you can make sure that you are only working with documented migrant workers, probably, which is a huge problem in Southeast Asia. You can think of not working with people under the age that is allowed by the International Labour Organization. You can develop your SOPs following or mirroring the principles set by the ILO, which is the International Labour Organization. By doing that, you're making sure that you are covering this ground very safely. So this is just one example where I mentioned of health and safety, but it's beyond just health and safety. Health and safety becomes absolutely important if you are a manufacturer or if you're in the construction industry, because you are trying to reduce lost time injury as well. Right? You're trying to reduce lost time injury, which essentially improves your efficiency as an organization, which essentially saves you some money from medical claims, insurance, etc., and so that you have to go through in case of any fatality or in case of any major accident that may happen in your organization. Right? So from sustainability angle, what we are trying to tell you is try to prevent it or avoid it before it's happening. How can that be done? Have certified health and safety officers, have toolkit meetings or toolbox briefing sessions in a certain frequency that you have set. Use proper PPEs, or please make PPEs accessible to your employees and your staff. Make sure there is safety briefing and trainings on a regular basis. These are some of the sustainability initiatives that you can think of, which normally sounds like common sense to us. It is normally people say it is common sense and common practice for us, but from a sustainability angle, it is something that we are reinforcing and reiterating again, and we want to see documents of this. When you are going to go through audits in the future, when you have external auditors coming in, you can't convince them by saying, I have this practice. So what? I don't see it anymore. You may have the practice going on, but I need to see where you have documented training hours, what are the kind of training programs they have gone through, what are your practices in terms of toolbox briefings, who are your certified first aiders, who are your emergency response team members. These are the kind of questions that the auditors are going to ask you, and you need to be able to provide them with proof and supporting documents. From a sustainability angle, we are preparing you for that. We are preparing you for that to avoid penalties, fines, sanctions, and future delays in your business, to allow your business to be resilient to all these different requirements. Again, reiterating that this is what sustainability is all about. Right? Then few other things, that more common ones are like community engagement. Community engagement, before starting a major urban development project, construction firm holds community forums and surveys, which you have mentioned quite rightly so. You engage the head of certain community groups and community leaders and all. You do survey and you try to understand their local concerns and adjust your plan accordingly, or you compensate them accordingly. Even practices like this is very well part under the social pillar of sustainability and ESG. Local workforce development, this is something that I mentioned much earlier, collaborating with local trade schools to offer apprenticeship, supporting workforce development in the community where they operate, even constant learning and development programs for your own employees so that you can ensure that there is a growth trajectory for them. You don't want a person in an executive level to be an executive forever. You don't want an analyst to be an analyst forever. You need to make a way for them to become associates. That comes from a proper learning and development plan. That comes from a place, if you as an organization empower your people through proper workforce development program. An organization that doesn't have this, I essentially would never work. In my career, I've always emphasized employers who have a proper growth trajectory for me moving forward, and I'm sure it's the same for all of you. Because if you are stuck doing mundane work as an executive for 5 to 6 years, something is surely wrong, either in the organization or you as an employee in your aspirations to grow. Sustainability tells you that there should be a continuous improvement plan. As an organization, there should be a workforce development plan as well. which you should park under your social pillar of your ESG analysis framework. So irrespective of which industry you belong to, most of this matters, sustainability matters or material matters remain the same. The initiatives may vary, but the topic of discussion in these pillars remain the same. Then again, supply chain responsibility. You're looking into focusing on working with suppliers who have certified sustainable practices, not just sustainable. For example, working with suppliers who are aware of their own environmental impact, social impact, and governance-related policies. I have had a case where my client in Malaysians would know, my client in Perak, in Timor Perak, it's in outskirts of Perak. They work directly with this company in UK. They are a door manufacturer or a furniture manufacturer. 95% of their products go to one customer in UK. So we were in talks with them for very long on they want to do a carbon footprint assessment because their customers are bugging them to do. That's the term. Our customer is bugging us to do this. For the first 2 years or 3 years, they neglected the request from the customer. On the third year, the customers send them notice saying that this year, if I do not receive the carbon footprint assessment numbers or details or report, then sorry, I cannot invite you for the upcoming tender. So you can imagine a company that sells 95% of its products to that one company in UK. What would happen to their business if they don't abide by this supplier requirement or request that the customer has, right? So from the UK customer side, what they are trying to do is they are trying to ensure within their supplier portfolio, they do not work with any unethical suppliers. They do not work with any suppliers who do not have their grounds covered when it comes to business ethics, environmental and social impact. So it can be that, the repercussion can be that big in terms of magnitude and impact, that if in that year we haven't gone in and done the assessment, then they wouldn't be able to submit the numbers in the supplier form, and they would be backed out from the tender because the UK company is trying to filter out these unethical suppliers who are in the portfolio. Which means then the UK player then, they are trying to ensure they are on the safe side, because if in any case the regulators or any regulators locally or globally does some form of audit or check or monitor, which happens on a regular basis, your suppliers, you are also answerable equally on why you are working with suppliers who have breached certain code of conduct. Example, my colleague, Mr. Malvin, he is from the palm oil industry. In their case, they had worked and they have provided RSPO and MSPO certification to a company in Indonesia. And next year, they got to know that there were cases of child labor in that estate for which they were working on. So they were scrutinized on which grounds did you guys provide them with RSPO certification without you not really knowing or visiting and understanding what is going behind the scenes there. So that company, I remember, had to pay heavy penalties as well. Of course, the company recruiting child laborers are a bigger haul, but my colleague here, their company was also scrutinized and had to pay a fine and a fee for providing a certain for providing assistance to get a certain certification for that company. So it is not just safeguarding yourself, it is safeguarding your suppliers, it is ensuring you're working with the right vendors, you are ethically selling to people, your proper procurement practices. All of that comes under sustainability, supply chain related sustainability, or developing a very resilient supply chain, which comes from an ESG standpoint as well. Lastly, governance, transparency in reporting. We want you to report what is true. Transparently disclose your numbers. If your numbers are higher than your peers or competitors or comparators, it doesn't matter. If it is what it is, you have to disclose the way it is, number one. Second thing is you cannot under-report or over-report. Third is if a certain material matter is pertinent to your industry or business, you have to make sure you are disclosing them in your annual reports, in your corporate governance reports, in your sustainability reports. So that is very, very important. Releasing an annual sustainability report audited by a third party detailing its ESG performance metrics can be one of the best ways to cover this ground. Inclusive leadership, right? The company might create new leadership roles such as CSO, which is Chief Sustainability Officer, or Director of Community Relations, who brings expertise from fields traditionally outside of construction. This broadens the scope of the decision-making process, bringing in varied perspectives that can help company better address ESG considerations. So which essentially means you develop inclusive leaders in your organization. When I say inclusive leaders, it is beyond just the traditional way of setting a path for achieving your targets, construction project targets. It's also to ensure that your leaders are aware of the community impact. For example, you're providing a role as such Director of Community Relationship. And today in Malaysia and in most parts of Southeast Asia, we do have the role of a Chief Sustainability Officer or a Director of Sustainability or a Chief Strategy Officer under whom the sustainability pillar of the responsibilities are parked under. So having inclusive leadership in an organization is absolutely important. Otherwise, everything else that we are talking about would essentially be put under a bus. We wouldn't really see any of those happening in reality, or the implementation of it really happening, right? So this essentially starts at the leadership level as well. Compliance audits, constantly go through audits. Don't be afraid of audits, because audits is something that gives you external validation. It gives you a third-party point of view, or an eye, or an additional layer of validation that tells you that your practices are correct, that you are doing things the way you should, and it comes with an additional layer of confidence in your practices that you have. So when I say audit, you can audit of course, you have to audit your financial numbers and all that, but beyond that, you can also audit your sustainability report, and also have year-on-year audits for your different certifications that you maintain. So don't be afraid of that. Engaging an external auditor to review compliance with new emission standard, ensuring that all the gaps are identified and addressed would be good to have. Stakeholder collaboration and communication. This has come up quite a number of times when I was the floor today. Establishing stakeholder advisory panel consisting of community leaders, environmental experts, and workers to advise on its ESG strategy, whether they are feasible, whether they are achievable and attainable or not. It cannot just happen at a leadership level. For that, you need to engage your broader organization, which essentially how is covered in your sustainability governance structure, which is comprising of your board of directors, your senior C-suite level management people. You have your HODs and managers and assistant managers. You have the working team under that. Even if it requires, you can involve your blue collar people, because they also need to have a voice in order to voice out what are their concerns. So stakeholder collaboration under your governance pillar is absolutely important, right? So this, again, from a construction and property industry, we are talking about the certain ESG initiatives that we need to focus on. Again, I need you to really concentrate on this, because later we will run an activity. As you are seated in the tables, we'll run a very simple activity of materiality prioritization based on any industry that you want to select. The second part of today, which I think maybe I can ask the organizers, are we good to go for a break now, or how does it work? What time do we have a tea break? We can go for a tea break now, right? So what I'm going to do is we will break for a very quick tea break now. Probably the tea break is going to be roughly 10 to 15 minutes, if I'm not wrong. Once we are back, we will go through the last part of the presentation, which is again looking into another industry within another sector within the engineering industry, and understand what are their ESG initiatives and best practices. The activity that would follow from there would be materiality prioritization. We would want to know for a certain industry what are the topics that you would prioritize from ESG standpoint, followed by how would you rank and rate them on financial risk, reputational risk. So once we are back from the break, we will go through the last part of the slide, followed by the activity, and we are back. So thank you very much for patiently listening to the presentation so far. Now it is 10:20, roughly 10:25. Probably we can be back by 10:40. Okay, thank you.
So I'm going to things are so much. So so what now now I'm gonna keep the learning the last That's too much of alien shit. Okay, now Jose. Right? Email. Yeah. So restart the computer works. Right. If the time cannot, we just open the window, just roll out. One more day, no, this tomorrow we must end. Today. What are you writing? Slow letter. Slow letter. Then you focus on the moment.
Probably wait for 2 more minutes or if you want to settle down.
Good concept.
Can you help me with the clicker, please? Not changing. Okay. Okay, so thank you very much. I hope you got some time to grab some snacks very quickly, your coffee as well. So that was in the construction industry what we were talking about right before this break. Or maybe we can just try to look into a slightly different industry, not very different, but slightly different from what we've been talking about, and look into ESG, transportation, and the mobility industry. Again, the reason behind is because we not only need engineers in construction and property development, but also, as I said, some of the industries that I mentioned earlier, the engineers do play a key role in the transportation and mobility industry as well. So for the transportation and mobility industry, when I say transportation mobility, what kind of companies come to your mind? Ports, yes, ports is one, maybe container handling ports, any other type of organization that comes to your mind immediately? Airlines, freight handlers, right? In Malaysia, maybe you're looking into Post Malaysia. Yes, great food. Then any other company other than Malaysia, other DHL, any other company that comes to your mind? What is the most common amongst transportation and logistics industry? What is that one common factor amongst all these different companies that I mentioned? Yes, emissions is one factor. What is the common element? For you to transport goods from point A to point B, what is necessary? The vehicles themselves, be it container ships, be it cargo ships, be it heavy duty trucks, light duty trucks, rigid vans, rigid trucks, articulated trucks, articulated vans. There's so many different types of vehicles that we can use, the different modes of transport that we use in order to transport your goods from point A to point B, or people from point A to point B. And the very first thing that comes to my mind, and as I mentioned it here, and quite rightly pointed out by Kim, rightly pointed out by him, is most pertinent ESG topic that comes to your mind is emission for this industry. And some of the statistics that also supports it, it says transport is responsible for about 24% of direct carbon dioxide emission from fuel combustion, with road transport alone, forgetting the sea and the air route, road transport alone making up 3/4 of this total. Embedding ESG can support climate targets, reduce urban air pollution, and enhance sustainable mobility. So if I'm looking into the reason why I told at the very beginning of the session, sustainability from industry to industry, case to case, person to person, organization to organization. So what is pertinent and prominent for the construction industry does not have to be necessarily pertinent in the same order of ranking for the transportation and mobility industry. So if carbon emissions is, example, fifth or sixth most prominent topic for the construction industry, it probably is the first or the second most important topic for the environmental section or pillar for the transport and mobility industry. So your definition of sustainability, or your definition or your understanding of sustainability for this industry would be something as such. So you are looking into ESG in transportation and mobility focuses on minimizing the environmental impact of moving people and goods while improving social outcomes and corporate accountability. Environmental priorities include reducing emissions through electrification where it's possible. I would say you're looking to alternative sources of fuel. Here they say adopting low emission fuel and expanding public transport as much as possible in order to reduce per capita environmental impact or footprint, which means if, as I said again earlier this morning, if you can transport 80 people from point A to point B using a bus, you are transporting only one person or two person using a private car from the same point A to point B. So the per capita emission for traveling 80 people in the same bus, the same distance, is much lower than what it would be for you to transport them from A to point B using. As a result, we promote the use of public transport as much as we can, if it is feasible for you. I understand for people in engineering, sometimes it's construction and property development, you do travel very far where you do not have the accessibility of public transport. So that in those special scenarios, it is understandable. So social efforts aim to improve accessibility, safety, and affordability for all users. From a governance perspective, transparency, emissions data, ethical labor practices, and inclusion, inclusive urban planning, the key. Right? So, as I said, it doesn't vary significantly, but the way they are ranked and prioritized would have some differences between these two industries that we are now comparing. Example, again, not reading through all of them, some of the material topics for this industry that would be prominent would probably be fuel emissions and air pollution, the adoption of EV and the infrastructure, noise pollution control, LCA of vehicles or life cycle impact of vehicles, urban congestion and energy usage, sustainable logistics and freight system, waste from vehicle maintenance and operations, climate adaptations for infrastructure, for example, roads, rails, and even your vehicles as well. So one interesting fact, by 2050, the global transport sector must cut emissions by 90% aligned with climate goals. Again, this is your global pledges. When I say global pledges, you're looking into your Paris Agreement, you're looking into your commitments, national commitments as well. Here we have a commitment of 30% reduction in greenhouse gases from your national inventory. So for you to align to the global or the national pledges, if you're talking about a global pledge, the transport sector alone has to cut down their emission by 90% in order to be in alignment with this, highlighting the urgent need for greener transport solution. From a social standpoint, one of the stats that you may look at, over 1.3 million people die each year in road traffic crashes. Socially responsible transport system must prioritize human safety alongside performance. So performance is not just the only factor that should drive this industry. In this industry, as you are transporting goods and people from, as I said, from one point to the other, the factor or the element of human safety should also take huge prioritization in this case, where you're looking into material topics such as road and passenger safety, labor rights for drivers and logistics workers, working conditions in ride-hailing and delivery services, community impact of infrastructure project. We're looking into inclusive urban planning and mobility access. We were just having a chat about inclusivity outside of during the break on whether contribution to the community is considered just as CSR or it actually improves inclusivity. So Dipesh was telling me about how he looks at it from a standpoint of being inclusive rather than just charity per se. So being inclusive is not doing charity to the people of the organization or to your customers or your clients. Being inclusive is where you are developing plans, like for example, inclusive urban planning and mobility access that will make sure of health and safety of the road users, health and safety of the people who are operating the vehicles and moving, helping the transport goods from point A to B. So that is inclusive planning and inclusive mobility planning per se. So from a sustainability angle, when we add this as an important material topic, we need to prioritize on policies and SOPs that you have in place to maintain this. When I say only policies and SOPs, anybody can develop. It's not just limited to that. What are your numbers? What are your LTIs? What are your injury rates? What are your medical claims, insurance claims? How do you insure your people? How do you ensure the safety of people on the road, etc.? All of that stats, those numbers year on year, has to be monitored and disclosed to the best in the most transparent and accountable manner as you can. Health impacts of transport-related pollution, stakeholder engagement, and social license to operate. These are few of the important social pillar material topics that you may prioritize in this industry. Followed by from governance. Governance more or less would remain very similar, where you are looking at ESG disclosure and transparency, anti-corruption policies, safety standards, compliance. You're looking at governance of transport infrastructure projects, board accountability. You're looking at legal compliance and risk management, etc. So governance more or less in your industry remains same for most of the sectors. Effective governance builds public trust and is key to delivering safe, inclusive, and future-ready mobility systems. So having said that, let me try to pull out some recent news that we have come across in this industry. ESG news, first one that I would want to share with you would be the case of Amazon and Air Products begin trials of Mercedes-Benz hydrogen fuel cell trucks. So I've probably heard of EV trucks before. We have hybrid trucks, we have EV trucks, hybrid vehicles. Now, Mercedes has started testing their hydrogen fuel cell trucks, right? Even further going beyond just EVs, conventional EVs, I would like to say, we're looking into hydrogen fuel cell trucks. Daimler Truck has commenced customer trials for their Mercedes-Benz Gen H2 hydrogen fuel cell trucks, marking a significant step towards sustainable transportation industry. And 5 prototype trucks have been tested by the companies including Amazon and Air Products, aiming to achieve zero emissions logistics solutions. So again, as I said earlier, it is impossible to aim for or attain zero emissions per se, but with practices as such, you can surely aim to reduce or minimize your emission from the standpoint of carbon neutrality. Carbon neutrality, where you are talking about you are emitting at the same rate as you are absorbing and offsetting. So if you can come to a state of carbon neutrality, in my opinion, that is the ideal state, because carbon zero would be impossible to achieve. Insights from trials will shape future carbon dioxide neutral truck development, which means based on the tests as such, when the real test that goes on from actual customers or clients, the results that come out from here would be acting as an enabler to promote the future of carbon dioxide neutral truck development for improving sustainable mobility or sustainable transportation. Similarly, we have E.ON and MAN to build Europe's largest EV charging network for trucks. Again, this is an effort to improve the sustainable mobility through EV trucks, electric trucks. So E.ON and MAN have partnered to construct Europe's largest public electric vehicle charging network for trucks. This initiative supports the transition to electric freight transport, addressing the need for widespread charging infrastructure to facilitate the adoption of electric trucks across the continent. Because we understand one of the key challenges is how fast or slow or how many points do you have or ports do you have in order to charge your electric vehicles. These days is a concern. I have faced similar issues before. I've seen my colleagues and friends face similar issues before, where we had to think twice before making a very long journey on where am I going to charge next in this long journey. So these people, again, it's in Europe, they are trying to solve this issue by coming up with the largest network charging system or infrastructure for promoting the use of electric trucks. It is an ecosystem, as we mentioned earlier, I think quite a number of times. If the ecosystem for the electric trucks is thrive, you need to ensure that the charging infrastructure is also equally robust for this to happen properly, and for the promotion to happen properly. So these are some of the interesting news that tells you that there are initiatives in place that are promoting sustainability through different means in different industries. And in your respective industry, you should not pull back. You should do some research, and you should do some stakeholder sessions internally, externally, and you should do some feasibility tests, some techno-economic tests as well on certain initiatives to understand how it can bring long-term value to your business and organization. Don't always look for quick or easy wins or quick wins, because if you're looking for quick wins, sustainability is not a thing for you, because this would require some time for you to receive ROI from the initiative that you put in place, ROI for your investment per se, right? Having said that, we'll spend the next 15 to 20 minutes on understanding ESG from a risk perspective. Anybody who works in a risk and compliance team here? Risk compliance. Nobody? Anybody who has worked with maintaining risk registers before? One. Anybody who has attended any meetings in your organization with regards to taking meeting minutes or risk notes where your senior management is discussing on what is considered a risk for your business? No?
We keep the analysis of risk activities. So basically, considering the probability of certain scenario will happen.
Exactly.
What implications?
Exactly. That is exactly what I'm talking about. So you've been a part of such discussion before. Yes, absolutely. So you do risk assessment. The risk assessment, the most common factor that comes into play is, again, what is the risk about? What is the likelihood of the occurrence of the risk? Sorry, what is the likelihood of occurrence of the risk, and what is the impact of the risk if it occurs, right? So this is a very common way of assessing risk, and you eventually deduce a number between 25 to 1. So you multiply, if you do Likert scale 1 to 5, you allow your team members, internal team members, to rate them. The basis of the rating, you understand how big or less of a risk it is, whether it is catastrophic, or it is a risk you just monitor regularly for the sake of monitoring. That quite rightly pointed out by Mr. Mendig and Mr. Kim, they do risk assessments. Risk assessments are becoming absolutely important from an ESG standpoint as well, because if you are trying to follow global standards such as the Global Reporting Initiative, GRI, or you're trying to follow IFRS standards, or you are trying to follow SSB standards, whichever standard you are trying to follow in order to disclose your sustainability matters or your sustainability report, risk assessment comes at the beginning of your sustainability report, which means first and foremost, you start with the material prioritization. Once you know what is material to your business, for each of those material topics, you need to understand what kind of risk is associated with the initiatives that you're trying. Like I think Mr. King said, for construction, project to project, you figure out in construction, maybe is it safe to say that delay of raw material supply is a risk to your business, right? It is. So if it is a risk to your business, how does it affect your business? Delays in operation, leading to, yes, so leading to more cost burden on the project, right? So if you have a risk as such that you've identified, what kind of mitigation measures do you have in place? More supply, more supplier. Yes, you have a diverse supplier portfolio, and you have your alternatives sorted if there are certain delays from certain suppliers, which means you know whom to engage in case of delays, right? So these are the kind of mitigation measures that you have in place. And once the mitigation is in place and you have mitigated, what essentially happens next is your risk, the number that you associate with it, comes down, right? Comes down, which is considered you have acted on the risk. This is how we want you to think about risk management. And every organization has an enterprise risk management system. Any good organization, you call it ERM, right? Enterprise risk management. And there are certain global standards again. You don't build the ERM from scratch. You don't build it from thin air. there are certain practices that you need to follow. You can follow the COSO risk management framework, or you can follow the ISO 31000 risk management as well to develop your ERM, or in this case, to integrate ESG risks within your existing risk registers, right? So in my experience of working with different companies, they have a department by department risk register as well. And then all of that combinedly goes to an entire group-wide risk that you have. And that risk register can be further enhanced to integrate your ESG related risk. In most of the cases, all the risks that you identify under ESG pillar is already a part of ERM. You just have to figure out and identify which categorizes under which pillar of ESG. Right? So that supply chain related risk that I just discussed with Mr. Keith is a part of your, which pillar should it be a part? Sustainable supply chain is the topic. Which pillar should it be a part? Governance. Absolutely. It's a part of your governance. Right? Then understanding risk profiles helps engineering and ESG teams tailor decision making, improve resilience, and lead sustainable development more responsibly. So this is a kind of a know your risk, know your attitude towards risk matrix, where on this side you have the risk taking capability. Here you are risk aware. This spelling should be AVRS averse, sorry, it's spelled, and this is risk oblivious. So may I know in which category do you see yourself falling under? Just take a look at it and just try to figure out which category do you fall under from an attitude of taking risk or understanding risk. Anybody who's a cowboy here does what he feels like doing. Don't think I'll see what will happen next. Don't care. Maybe we'll see when it happens. We'll sort it out. I'm sure there are people who have this cowboy attitude. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm judging you on the basis of that as well. Anybody who has this cowboy attitude, work. Last time my sales team used to have this cowboy attitude where we say we just go and see what happens. We try to get the sales at any cost. Right? We try to get a deal of this at any cost. So I used to tell them, you guys are cowboys, not corporate people. Say it doesn't matter, that pays your bill. Whichever way I tackle it doesn't matter. So that is the cowboy attitude that you have. Anybody here who can classify themselves as cowboy attitude in terms of risk? Let me work, I'll see where it happens. No, right? Probably it's good that it's a no. Everybody here. Not the best way of approaching risks within an organization or your department or within projects as well, right? Because it can have heavy repercussions moving forward. Pioneer understands the risks, takes chances, but stays in control. There will be some of you who are pioneer, right? You understand that it is a risk. However, you take control, you take a chance and you stay in control at all times when you are aware that if this happens, I have all the mitigation measures in place. I know what to do, where to go next, and what SOP to follow in order to mitigate this. I'm sure there are some of you who fall under this pioneer category. Settler knows that there are risks, but doesn't want to change anything. We're just happy to just sit there. Be like, it's okay. I know that there is a risk associated to this, but I don't really want to change anything. Let it run the way it is. There are people in organization as such who are settlers, gophers, doesn't know what's out there, or they just stay underground where it's safe. Basically, whenever anything as such happens, you are not very sure why it happened, how to react to it, how to sort of mitigate it. So neither I am not a very big fan of the gopher attitude or even the settler attitude. The other two, more or less, is still okay because sometimes cowboy style works for certain industry and for certain departments. Being a pioneer is where we all essentially want to be in an ideal scenario where you are very much in control of all sorts of risks associated with your job description and your role in the organization and in the project. So this is a very simple test of know your risk attitude kind of a test that we do with participants. That having said that, the IFRS S1 and S2 background, I'll just share with you very, very briefly. Sustainability related risks and opportunities is what we are trying to make you think about, because we've been thinking about departmental risks, as I said, project to project risks, etc. But can you tie them to sustainability matters is what the IFRS standard is now trying to enhance or improve on. The S1 standards, we're asking for broader sustainability related risks across the entire value chain. And in the IFRS S2 standard, we are looking into, in the S2 standard, we are looking into the climate related risks and opportunities, which we call the CRROs, where we are talking about understanding how climate resilient your company is to climate change. We are essentially following the TCFD standard. A lot of jargons, sorry, I can't make do without the jargons because it is mandatory. So IFRS S1 and S2 standards, if you ever hear these terms next, S1 standard wants you to do a value chain sustainability risk assessment across your entire value chain from your upstream activities all the way down to your downstream. For example, if you are a manufacturer, it starts all the way from your engagement with suppliers to procurement of materials, how they are procured, from where they are procured, how do they transport to your facilities, what are the midstream processes that take place. Once the final good is ready, was the QC/QA work, was the distribution channel work, who are the distributors, how they are distributed and transported, eventually all the way until how the end of life of the product really looks like. Whether it ends up in the landfill, whether it's recycled, or whether it's incinerated, etc. You would need to assess risk across all these activities from your upstream all the way to your downstream. Right? So that is what the S1 standard wants you to do or promotes you to do, and the S2 standard promotes you to understand your climate resilience. It wants you to build more climate resilient business to physical and transitional risks. Physical risks can be classified as acute physical risks or chronic physical risks. Transitional risks are classified in 4 different categories. With that, mostly the most prominent ones are your reputational risk and your policy related risks in the transitional risk categories, right? Again, one example that we may go through together that IFRS has actually shared in their educational material. The source I have put here so you can access the document. It is completely available. So if we take the case, I'm not going to read through the second column. I'll read you through the example to make it easier. Concepts underlying sustainability related risks and opportunities. First and foremost, as I said, even before opening this slide, was the importance of a value chain map for you to understand the value chain. Example, let's take the example of a clothing brand company that considers its interaction with natural environment in its supply chain, right? So a value chain, as I said earlier, it promotes you to consider these 3 key elements. I think it's better if I write it down here. Number 1, your resources, all the resources within your value chain. It can be natural resources, can be your financial resources, or it can be your human capital resources as well. Human capital, right? Number 2, your stakeholder groups. And within your stakeholder groups, the interactions and the relationships between the stakeholders. And number 3 is interaction between all these elements together. And always remember, it starts upstream, you have the midstream activities and processes, then you have your downstream. So your upstream activities here, the midstream activities here, your downstream activities here, your raw material input, your processing of goods and products, services as well, downstream distribution, finally the end of life of your products and services. All of them would be essential to be included in your value chain. So let's consider this value chain for this company, where a clothing brand company considers its interaction with the natural environment in its supply channel. What are the resources and relationship? The clothing brand company considers the use of water in its production process as one of the pertinent material topics. Use of water in its production process to be one of the pertinent material topics. Of course, because they're a clothing company or a cloth manufacturer in the ready-made garments industry, for example, RMG sector, water management is a key material topic here. Dependencies and impacts. The clothing brand company considers its dependency on high amounts of water to produce its products. Now, what does this tell you? The dependency that they're looking at here is being dependent on consuming higher volume of water for production. Can we potentially classify this as a risk or not? Yes or no? If you feel it's a no, you can say it's a no. The dependency on water as an element that is absolutely important for production. Yes. Only one yes. Mr. Kim said yes. Everybody else agrees to him. Yes, it is a risk. How can I categorize this risk? How can you name this risk? Dependency on high volume of water consumption, right? Now, sustainability related risks and opportunities that could reasonably be expected to affect the prospect. The clothing brand company identifies this SRRO to use new technology that would reduce the water intensive processes in its production. This would significantly reduce production costs incurred by the entity and reduce the reliance on water consumption as much as possible. So the aim here is not just knowing that it is a risk, but your ability as an organization to convert the risk to an opportunity, right? The fact that you rely on high volume of water consumption is a risk to your business. It brings you an opportunity to look towards technology that will reduce your water intensive processes in production. You are trying to find processes that are less water intensive as a replacement, which can further enhance your production capabilities, which can further reduce your operational costs moving forward. When I say operational costs, in the longer run, do not look for quick wins, because for you to forego your capex, for you to break even from your capex or to get an ROI, surely it will take some time, right? If you're investing on a certain technology that is bringing in new machines that are less water intensive, to enable this opportunity, you would have to surely invest, and you have to understand what the ROI is, what is the payback period for that, and transform this risk into an opportunity moving forward in the future. If you cannot transform risks to opportunities, at least the bare minimum is for you to understand across your value chain what are the risks that are associated, and tie them to your organizational policies and SOPs that clearly states mitigation measures that are in place to address this risk. So as an investor, or as a shareholder, or as regulators and authorities who are monitoring your practices, we would want to see that in your sustainability report. We don't want to see your CSR practices, to be very honest. We would want to see come up with a comprehensive risk management manual or comprehensive risk assessment practice, or at least across your entire value chain. How are you mapping your risks and trying to transform them into possible opportunities moving forward? And this is how the IFRS S1 standard is trying to enable you to think again, industry to industry, company to company, department to department. These would vary significantly. The initiatives would vary significantly. It's completely okay for you to define your own ways to do it, as long as your thinking, your systems thinking process remains the same and is consistent, right? Some of the key steps again that I have adopted from global practices like ISO 1000 standards and the COSO risk management framework, COSO framework, are these steps that I normally apply. Number one, risk identification. Number two, evaluation of the risk, which Mr. Benedict was talking about, the risk assessment. Number three, risk treatment. Number four, defining the key risk indicators. Now, what is risk identification? You define the key ESG-related risks affecting your objectives along with root causes and the organizational attitude towards them. Right? Number one, identify the risk across the value chain. What is the objective? What is the root cause? Number three, what is your organization's current attitude towards those risks that you've identified? This step sets the foundation for prioritizing risk response. It's the very first step. Second step, evaluation. Assess, as I said, the likelihood, the impact of each risk after applying existing controls and also before applying existing controls, and compare against your organization's risk appetite to determine treatment urgency. So basically, in the second step, you are developing your company's risk appetite. Third step is your risk treatment. Outline targeted actions, assign respective data owners and individuals who are responsible for certain actions, define the KPIs and timelines to mitigate or manage each risk, ensure proactive and accountable risk management practices. That is number three, risk treatment. Once you have identified, you have evaluated it and quantified it. Number three is risk treatment. You have to treat the risk. Number four, key risk indicators, establish measurable red flags and thresholds for each risk to monitor performance and trigger early responses before the risks can escalate. Right? So the important term here is monitor performance and trigger early response before the risk can escalate. Now, step by step, right? So the first step was risk assessment. The first step of risk assessment was risk identification. So let's look at maybe just one per step. Let's again consider a company that requires a heavy sort of reliance on water consumption. So objective at risk, or one of the business area here, would be reduce water usage by, again, it's hypothetical. I haven't taken it from any organization. I have just put some hypothetical numbers because I can't disclose my client's risk register. So reduce water usage by 50% in 2 years. What is the risk here? Over-reliance on municipal water and having no recycling system internally in your current organization or in the current project. So the objective of risk is reduce water consumption. The risk itself is the over-reliance on municipal water and having no recycling system. So you can split it into two if you want. Number one, number two. Risk impact description. It can lead to delays in meeting targets, higher cost, and negative reputational image or reputational image at risk, let's say. Probable root cause, lack of planning, no capex for water recovery technology or water recycling technology. So this can be split into two again. Probable root cause, I said, these few things are important. Objective, risk, impact description, the root cause of it, the risk category, whether it's ES or G, and the risk attitude or archetype would be what kind of risk attitude you should have towards it. This you can skip if you want, but if you can classify, you can still classify it. So this one will fall under settler according to me. Then step number two, for the same risk, the risk ID 1, we are looking into the assessment of it, basically the evaluation of the impact score, residual impact, between 1 to 5, residual likelihood 1 to 5. So this is again done based on a lot of qualitative discussion amongst different stakeholder groups, internal stakeholder groups and external stakeholder groups. So if your water saving fixtures, so your existing control is having water saving fixtures and audits, your previous impact would be 3 and your residual likelihood would be 2. The new risk score here would eventually come to 3 multiplied by 2, 6. Your risk appetite or target risk score is 8. So what does that mean? Your response strategy for a risk as such should be to treat it. So when you are treating it, that means you need to immediately take action on risk as such. If you see the one below, the second one, which again, I'm not reading it because we don't have ample time. To maintain compliance with worker safety example, the one, the calculation 4 times 3 is 12. It's a current risk, or risk appetite for this is 6. So risk appetite for this is 6 means this kind of a risk we can tolerate, right? We can tolerate because we have the flexibility or ample time to treat this when it happens, but this one requires immediate kind of a treatment. So your risk register essentially needs to be designed in this thought, in a way that it has this same thought process, systems thinking, followed by number 3. If you can remember what was step number 3, risk treatment. Now, when you treat the risk, I want to know how would you treat it. Response strategy here was to treat this particular risk. Risk response action, install rainwater harvesting system, update supplier contracts, and then you set your KPI on the percentage of water that is to be reduced in terms of consumption. Your timing by when you would want to achieve that percentage here. Who is your risk owner in this case? It is the sustainability department or the officer. It can be anybody else based on your organizational structure, your org chart. Your risk indicator or red flag here is water usage exceeds baseline for 2 months. This is the red flag that you need to monitor. If your water usage exceeds the baseline for 2 months, you immediately have to take action on it. And the unit of measurement would be meter cube per. So this is these are again some of the most important elements in your register that you need to add, followed by the last part. If you can recall in the diagram, it is the key risk indicators, the KRIs. The KRIs here would be for the same one, the water inefficiency one, monthly water usage per meter cube of construction. The red flag or the threshold exceeds baseline by 10% for 2 consecutive months. Again, saying the unit of measurement is meter cube per month per site. Frequency of monitoring this would be monthly. You can set your own frequency. What is the data source? You are tracking this data of water consumption from your utility bills or your site reports. And if you are trying to link it to your ESG pillar, as I said, you can link it to the environment pillar. So this is one way of developing a risk register. You can monitor, you can envision this as a continuous Excel sheet or Excel diagram. So basically here, I can't put all together in one slide. So you can consider from this way, it moves to here, then it moves in this direction. Lastly, it will move in this direction. So a risk register that you develop should essentially take all these 4 factors into consideration. This is my opinion, and this is backed by the ISO standards. So we can follow that. And having said that, again, you may ask me, why should I do so much of work in order to meet what kind of requirements? So this concept, as I said, of double materiality assessment, understanding the impact inside out and the outside in concept has become very popular in ESG sustainability and overall in terms of businesses. Now, we not only look into the impact style of reporting for multi-stakeholder disclosure, we also look into the financial risks and opportunities that would lead to sustainability-related financial disclosure. So this concept of impact maturity and financial maturity combined would give you your double maturity assessment and double materiality disclosure, right? And this is how you can visualize a maturity matrix. I don't think we will have full time to go through this particular calculation for climate-related risk, but I will make sure that the slides are available to you so that you can go and look at it at your own time and pace. Now, in a group, what I need you to do is you have your this extra these pages here, right? As a group, I would want you to nominate one industry that you would want to assess the ESG materiality for. Right? So the option for flexibility is that they allow you to choose whichever industry you want to choose. Example, if you choose construction, for construction, what I will need you to do is I need you to split your the piece of paper that you have in front. Is it possible for us to get the flip charts taken out from here and provided to each of the tables? Maybe this one's not good. Okay. So the brief for this again, very simple. What I would need you to do is need you to number one, pick an industry first. Right? You pick your own industry first. For that industry, under the environment pillar, under the social pillar, and the governance pillar, I need you to brainstorm within your team members and come up with at least 5 different topics, which we call the material topics, that are most prominent to that industry. Right? What does that mean? Okay, construction, we already discussed. The environment pillar, we are looking into sustainable materials, or we are looking into maybe green certifications. Social pillar, we are looking into labor practices, we are looking into human rights. We are looking into corruption policies, ethical businesses, code of conduct, and so on. Okay, so that is the first part of your task. Is that clear to everybody? Okay, that is the easier part. Now, the slightly more challenging part here is the positioning of the material topics. Normally, in the materiality assessment, you would position based on quantitative rankings, impact rating. Here, qualitatively, I want you to discuss amongst your team members and draw a materiality matrix, something fixed axis. This is again very simple, so you don't have to be very worried about this. I need you to draw an x-axis and a y-axis in your mahjong paper. In the x-axis, what you consider is impact on your business or financial health. And in the y-axis, you consider companies' reputational risk, right? So as you go along the x-axis, that material topic drives more impact to your financial health of the company. As you drive along the y-axis, it is more prominent for the reputation or the image of your company, right? Let's see how we can do this. So you basically have to draw and split this matrix into 4 different quadrants. Okay, this is after you have already identified the 5 topics per pillar, E, S, and G. You have 15 total topics, right? You split this into 4 different quadrants. This can be quadrant 1, quadrant 2, quadrant 3, and quadrant 4, right? So let's pick. I'll help you with 1 or 2 material topics. let's pick, for example, let's pick labor practice. Labor practice, and let's choose construction industry. We choose construction industry and labor practice. What you need to ask yourself in a group is, in the case of poor labor practice, or in the case of any unethical labor practices, what would be impacted most first? Is it my impact on my financial health, or is it the impact on the reputational risk of the image of the company? Which one is it? Reputation and image, right? So which tells me, so I consider that as one small dot or a cross. Let me take that cross and try to position it somewhere here. So I'm assuming that it has higher reputational risk. So I'm going up the order here in the y-axis. And then how can it have a detrimental impact on your financial health? To what extent? It does, right? Little. So if little means in the x-axis, I don't have too much of a movement. So according to Mr. Kim, if we say little, my positioning for labor rights is here, right? Right. So similarly, carbon footprint assessment for transport and mobility, reputation, yes, and impact on financial health, yes as well, because we are being continuously scrutinized by regulators who are monitoring our level of emission. So probably, in my opinion, would be somewhere here. So from the 5 that you develop, 5 per pillar, I need you to pick top 3 and position them here. 3, 3, and 3. Total 9 topics. I want to see how do you prioritize and rate them. There is again no right or wrong answer to this. This completely depends on your organizational goals. Here in this case, consider yourself as different members of the organization and you're representing the same. And organizational goals, risk taking, your risk appetite, risk managing practices or risk management practices. And number 4, your KPIs that you have set for this respective material topics. Okay? Is it clear? So number 1, first part of the task, 5, 5, and 5 material topics across E, S, and G pillars. Total 15 material topics across E, S, and G pillars. Of that, when you're doing the positioning, we'll go with the top 3 of each pillar. And I want to see how you position them. Once you have come up with the positioning, we would want you to come up and present on why you have positioned them in a certain way. Okay? So, is that clear? No? Clear? Very easy. Okay, I'll pass you some markers. Have you received markers to draw in your mahjong paper?
Yeah.
You already have a marker. Yeah.
These markers. Oh, wait.
More markers.
Oh, people. Imagine no. Okay, see. Stakeholder. Yeah, employee. Yes, no, we talk about issue the hours, right? Yeah. Employees. Yeah. Right? Means a pilot and the hostess is not employee. Almost know that. Messages. What are the social issues of messages? It's a very long you also need to talk about the stakeholder. Stakeholder means the messages. Say delay. But delay they are for our control. They don't want delay because of certain other issues. Global, the social issues needs about people. Delay is only one delay is not your problem. Delay is labor shortage. It's the issue, it's the issue. Labor shortage will cause a delay, cause a cancellation. Labor shortage, minor because we.
During pandemic, what I mean.
We talk about the problems. What are the problems that we face? What are the things that we talking about environment?
This industry.
Yeah.
My understanding, is not only problem. What is
Society.
what is you are doing for
Impact is a society. Impact, what are the impacts? We are talking about airline industry. Ease of social ease of transportation. Connecting the world. It's not it's also social.
cheaper price Asia. Correct. There is not a problem. I don't know. That's why you know. It's not problem.
It's a problem. You have to identify the problem. The other one is not. So it's a good thing that it's not the risk, right? Now we're talking about the risk. What are the risks? What else?
What is it?
The stress of the custom and the way check-in. Clearance. The clearance and You're stress. This stress, right? Because we get stressed now. Our students and engagement.
Yes. Yes.
Money stress. Money. Prices are very high. Risk you will bring to people. Only people who have no money. Too much unnecessary. No, unnecessary traveling. Yes. It's no problem lah. You don't have to travel. Other industries, governance. Governance. Harassment. Management. Risk. So what do you think about the risk? The risk to the management of the what is the risk of the company and management? Sorry. Speaking about the industry, please. Yeah, government here.
Security and this like someone or customer data, they try to go for customer data.
Sorry, yes.
That is a very
I know. It's what we got.
Lisa is a formula.
It's a custom issue. Custom issue. Custom is a must check. Custom is a must. The airspace control. Meaning is human what happened to the not the risk to the airline. The airline they don't care what you do. It is just I think so it's a illegal smuggling, right? Because they have the sharing. What happens is when you not trafficking. Trafficking is not the smuggling.
Illegal smuggling already illegal. We can say under
Okay, the last one is very easy, right? Transport a lot of things to watch the China cancel all the
shortage of the airplane. Then Malaysian part.
Going off, fair off. Not really that we got the China now has their own airline. Okay, one more. No. 3 or 3 is one. Then we have to decide. We have to decide which 3.
So what we are trying to use, right?
I want to make it here. It's literally this money for the sake of. That's why it's not sensible that. Not so dependent. We can always. Yes. So you are.
You consider financial health. Worker safety. If you get a sanction,
Okay, we choose three. You should. You have a solution. Okay, consumption, because that's a financial, reputation is low lah. Yeah. You consumption, we just put the cost of FC more than. Below say FC lah.
Drawing attention, we have the last 5 minutes to finish the task, and last 5 minutes we'll use to do a quick presentation.
Oh, reputation also. Let's try it. That's right, labor dies, man.
If you go like E1, S1,
Every time they do it, you're not probably they have to throw away, so they have to use money to. Financial reputation is low lah. Yeah. Three. Okay, good. Hours. Good. You always cancel you. You know, also you need to cancel because the more important cancellation. You get allowance for you are affect the health. If you have health, does it mean you affect the reputation of the airline? I don't know financial health. It's also the health. Financial health. Financial need. Then what's that? You work long hours before. Very strong. So you will increase the. Yeah. Fresh tea. It's a custom issue. Custom is the one who's checked. That's good. Thank you very much. No, this is organizing team.
So, for most of us who are done, we probably can sit down in our respective chairs and tables. So here, we just the whole group who are finishing up. Okay, guys, so I can request everyone to settle down. So I can wrap up the session. I'm running 10 minutes late already, but I didn't want to interrupt because I could see some really fruitful discussions going on. And again, so I was telling the group just now as well, in this exercise, right, when we do, as I said earlier this morning, we conduct a materiality prioritization exercise as the first stepping stone when you want to develop an ESG framework. It's an ESG framework which requires you to prioritize material topics in the way you have done is because you cannot shift your focus to 20, 30 material topics that may be pertinent to each of these things, right? So which essentially means, if you can help me hold this, if you help me hold this, making you do extra work, sorry, lunch hour, I know. So if you can look at your quadrant here, right? Quadrant, which is the first quadrant at the top right corner, if you have material topics that are walking around that region, what does that mean? Those are the material topics that requires the most attention in terms of planning, financial planning, human capital planning, management planning, and most amount of focus from leadership and from a governance standpoint, right? So you as an organization, as I said earlier, if you see any material topics where they have 25 different topics around this matrix, that is not really the right way of managing material topics because as an organization, you can only do as much in a year. So your priorities will shift year on year from a short or a long-term sort of goal and vision. So we do a refresher of a maturity assessment every year with an organization to ensure the positionings are still valid or based on acquisition, mergers, or divestment of companies, or you going into new business, or you going away from a certain business stream, your priorities would shift accordingly, right? And as you see the positionings here, what you do is you plan to manage them better throughout the year, right? And you make your targets and KPIs based on them. So this is the very first stepping stone for you to start developing your ESG framework. And for these material topics, everything that I spoke about from a risk management or a risk assessment standpoint stands valid and tall as well. So when you are developing your risk register, please make sure these topics are covered. The underlying topics within each of these material topics are covered in your risk management framework. And in your ESG or sustainability disclosure, you are disclosing your measures, your practices, your policies, your targets, KPIs, and risk management for each of these material topics very detailed. Okay, so that is the reason why we do this mock maturity assessment. Essentially, if you are to be one organization or one entity, this would then follow by a quantitative survey, which would actually result in your ratings from a scale, remediability, and impact standpoint, which eventually we will work it out in Excel worksheets or any other worksheet, and then position this based on results that we accumulate from 200, 300 odd stakeholders, right? So on that note, I would like to thank you all. Thank you very much for joining the session and helping me come up with a precise result. Dr. Adrian, I'll pass the mic over to you if you want to announce something. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Sally. So now we only have a few, probably about half an hour. So please go and have your lunch, and then we will meet downstairs at the ground floor for the bus, which will be here probably around 1:50. Sorry, 12:50. 1:15. We will depart at 1 o'clock sharp. So please be at the ground floor on time. 1 o'clock. Yes, 1 o'clock.
We depart at 1 o'clock, we have to be 12:50.
Yes, so please be there early before you leave. Remember to submit your report to Manman, yeah?